Good morning, 7th graders. So today is going to look a little different because we are all online. I just want to explain a couple of things. So we are going to be doing the same normal setup that we usually have, where I go through a little presentation, you take some notes, and then we apply it in our homework. I'm deciding to do a video for you guys so that you guys can pause it at your own time. And if you need to write down a definition, you don't have to wait and you can do it at your own speed. So I'm going to explain a couple things beforehand though. I put the presentation up here so that if you want to listen to the video and then you want to do the presentation notes on your own, you can. So that's going to be an option for you. There's going to be one more material here, which is going to be this video. And then this is the graphic organizer / notes that you guys are going to be filling out. And then this is what you guys are going to be applying for homework. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. I've already opened it up over here. And then this is what our graphic organizer looks like. So you guys are just going to click on that, but I'm just going to bring it up over here. So this is your graphic organizer. It's a little less structured. I have underlined the important things in the presentation, however. So if you're finding a really hard time finding things, then just go ahead and look for the underlined stuff, and then that usually is what is going to be in your notes. So I will be going through a couple of these with you just to make sure you understand it all. And then I will also explain the homework at the end of the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the PowerPoint, try to explain things to you, and you can pause it at any point if you want to, but I want to make it pretty quick for you guys so that you guys can move on to the notes and to the homework. Okay, so we've already been talking about ecosystems. We talked about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Photosynthesis happens in plants. Cellular respiration happens in animals or humans as well. So we're going to talk about how that energy is passed from organism to organism in an ecosystem. So first we need to know what a food chain is. You guys have already learned what a food chain is in the past, so I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So a food chain is a series of organisms that are dependent on the next as a food source. So obviously the corn gets eaten by the mouse and the mouse gets eaten by the owl. This is the circle of life. This is what happens. The rabbit eats the carrot, then the rabbit gets eaten by the fox, and then I don't know what kind of ecosystem this is, but then the fox gets eaten by a lion. I think that would be more accurate to say that it would get eaten by like a coyote or like a bear, maybe. No, I don't think a bear. And then we have the grass. The grasshopper eats the grass, then the frog eats the grasshopper, then the snake eats the frog, then that's a little bit more accurate. Then the eagle eats the snake. So we know that things get eaten by one another. And so there are usually 3 parts to a food chain. We have the producers, which are the plants that produce their own food via photosynthesis. We've talked about this. So it takes in the carbon dioxide, it takes in the sunlight, the energy from the sunlight, and it also takes in water. Then it produces its own glucose and it expels oxygen for us. So that is a process of photosynthesis. It creates its own food and its own energy. So that's why we call it producers, because they produce their own food and they produce their own energy. And then we have the consumers, which is what we are. We consume other organisms such as plants or animals to get our energy. And so that's going to be this after the first arrow. It's going to be the mouse, the bunny, the grasshopper. It's also going to be everything after the producers. Then we have the decomposers. These are organisms that break down organic matter or material. Those are going to be like our earthworms or our fungus that break down usually dead things or other plants, stuff like that. So we've got our consumers, the things that consume, and then the decomposers, which break down other materials. So those are our 3. So we've all learned about herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, but just a quick little recap. So herbivores are animals that only eat plants. They are evolved in order to have teeth, stomachs, and other qualities that enable them to process the energy from plants. So we have our elephants, our cows, our deer, our koalas, who mainly eat eucalyptus leaves. We have our tortoises. And so I want to show you, you guys are probably already laughing at this. So herbivores are generally what we call prey. They're the things that usually get eaten because they are only consuming really easy things such as plants. So if you guys notice that most of these creatures have the eyes on the outsides of their faces, that is because they are eating. When they are eating, they need to look out for predators. And so that's why we have our eyes in the front of our face, is because we're hunters. So we need to be able to see what we are doing and then go after it, and while they are on the lookout for predators. So if deer somehow became a meat-eating species, they would have their eyes on the front of their face because they are now hunters. So they have evolved to have their eyes on the outsides of their faces. So if you ever wonder what something is, what they eat, it's generally, you can always look at their eyes, and that's a pretty dead giveaway. They also have flatter teeth so that they can munch the they don't have to get through anything sharp like tendons or meat. They just have to kind of crush their food. So that's why they have flatter teeth. Alrighty. Then we have our carnivores. They have evolved to eat meat and other animals. They have specialized teeth, stomachs, and other qualities that enable them or allow them to get the energy they need from bodies of other animals. So, like I said before, so this is a horse and this is a bunny. These are both herbivores. So if you look at their eyes and where they are placed on their head, you will see that their main area to be able to see is on the peripheral vision. While we, or cats, they are hunters, they have it in the middle, and most of their eyesight is in front of them. So these guys are prepared and are able to see behind them. They can see partly behind them, mostly to the sides, and not too much in the front because they are focused on either running or getting out of there. So they also have really elongated canines. That's for usually ripping into meat or hunting, killing. And we all know what a predator looks like. So they have really sharp teeth or sharp claws, and they are usually go into pack mentality or they hunt on their own. Then we have omnivores, which are animals that eat plants and meat, such as humans. Well, they can eat humans, but what I meant was that omnivores are humans. Humans are omnivores. Some may choose not to eat meat, but our bodies are capable of digesting it. So when you hear that somebody is vegan or vegetarian, it's not that they aren't omnivores, it's just that they're choosing to not put that into their diet. So their body is perfectly fine and capable of consuming and processing meat, but it's a lifestyle choice. Omnivores have teeth, stomachs, and other qualities that enable them to eat and digest both plants and meat. So I didn't put teeth on here because we have both, our molars are really flat and are able to munch on those plants. And then we also have sharper teeth in the front that allow us to be able to chew into our food. We have also created utensils, but that's domestication. That's not anything to do with our biological ability to eat different foods. So bears, pigs, we have apes that can also eat both plants and animals. Okay, what is a food web? It's a network of interconnected food chains, so it's multiple food chains put together, which is just like, let's say that a rabbit eats grass and then a fox eats the rabbit. That is a food chain, but a food web is multiple food chains put into one. So it shows the energy flow through part of our ecosystem, So we know that producers, which is going to be the base of our pyramid here, is going to be at the bottom. And that has the most energy because they are getting their energy directly from the sun. So they are the first things that have the most energy because they produce it themselves. And then we have the herbivores, which is going to be on that second tier because they eat the plants. And so those are going to be called our primary consumers because they are the first things. We know that either an omnivore or a herbivore is going to eat the producers because that's what they are. That's what they can eat. That's what their body allows them to be able to eat. So we're going to have like bugs, mice, bunnies, other little small herbivores. Those are going to be our primary consumers because they are the first ones to consume. Then we have our secondary consumers, which are the things usually that are omnivores or small hunters, because then those eat the primary consumers. So producers, the first things that eat the producers, and then the first, second things that eat the other consumers. So, and then we have our tertiary consumers, which is just 3. So first, second, third, which are going to be our apex predators, which are the things that actually have the least amount of energy because it's already gone through 1, 2, and then now they are the third ones to get that energy. So we know that directly from the source, if it goes through multiple processes, that energy is eventually going to get less and less as it goes up to these apex predators. So we know that omnivores can be in the secondary or tertiary. We know that only herbivores are going to be in the primary consumers because they are the only ones that can eat the plants. And then we have our herbivores and maybe some omnivores like us who are going to be up here in the apex predator range. So energy is going to be really high down here, and then it's going to get less and less as it goes through more processes. So they are complicated, and many species can be at various levels. So we can be either a secondary consumer, we can be a tertiary consumer because we're humans. So that means that we can eat things such as rabbit, or we can eat, well, some cultures eat bugs. I don't think any of you guys do that in your pastime, but that means that we can either be a primary consumer if we are eating just plants, but that also means that we can be anywhere on this level except for producers because we do not produce our own food. So we can be primary all the way to tertiary. So that's where it gets a little crazy because different species can be at multiple levels. Okay, so we have our producers and decomposers, which are going to be our plants and our flowers, our fruits, our nuts, our seeds, our insects, because those are all things that produce their own energy through photosynthesis. Then we have our primary consumers, which this can be, any one of these could be eaten by any one of the primary consumers. So a mule deer could maybe eat a flower, but it could also eat an acorn. Right? So that's where those lines are going to interject. Then we have our secondary consumers, which are our, well, this is not going to be our ecosystem, our ringtail, our western whiptail raven, black-tipped jackrabbit, but you can see that the black-tipped jackrabbit can also eat a pika. It can eat a Pacific tree frog. It can eat a checker spot butterfly. And it can also eat a squirrel, which I've never seen that happen, but, you know, I guess it does. And then it goes up here where a mountain lion can eat multiple things as well. So this is why it's called a food web, is because it kind of looks like a spider web when things are, it's not just one direct line. So we know that a fir tree doesn't just get eaten by a Pacific tree frog, which doesn't just get eaten by a raven, which doesn't just get eaten by a coyote, let's say. So there are multiple things that multiple things can eat, if that makes sense. Okay, and so it shows our producers, our primary, our secondary, and our tertiary yet again. This is just a little bit more complicated of a way to explain it. Okay, so in order to live, animals need energy. So we know that plants use photosynthesis to create their own food, and that animals need to eat and breathe to create the energy via cellular respiration. So we know that these guys get the light energy directly, and then as the second or the primary consumers eat the producers, that a little bit of heat has gone away. That means that a little bit of the energy has escaped. And then on this one, a little bit more energy has escaped because now it's gone through 2 processes, 3, and then 4. So, there's multiple, there's not just 3 levels, there can be up to 10 levels, I'm sure. multiple levels of consumers, but this is just a little bit simpler for us. So just know that the producers have the most energy, and the apex predators, or the tertiary, I guess you could say your quaternary as well, that's 4, quattro or quarter, that's 4. So more energy is down at the bottom with the producers, and then the top consumers are going to have the least amount of energy. Okay, so let's give an example of a food chain and food webs. So this example contains a lot of information. Here are 3 food chains from it. So we have number 1, which is our oak tree, which gets eaten by the squirrel, which is going to be right here. And then the fox eats the squirrel. So that is 1 food chain. Then we have the oak tree. And then we have our earthworm, or I guess let's just say our caterpillar. I don't know what happened here. And then the caterpillar could then get eaten by the wood mouse. And then the fox eats the wood mouse. I don't know where my earthworm is. Oh, it's right here. Just kidding. And then we have our oak tree, our earthworm, our wood mouse, and then the wood mouse could maybe escape the fox, but then it gets eaten by an owl. So that's multiple food chains. And we know that the oak tree is our producer because it is a plant. The squirrels and the earthworms are our primary consumer because they are the ones who are eating the producers. And then we have our secondary consumers, which is the wood mouse, because then the wood mouse eats the caterpillar or the earthworm. And then we have our tertiary consumers, which eats the secondary consumers. So it just goes in a line, and there could be multiple of each. And then we have the decomposers. So after the fox is done eating the wood mouse, or the owl is done eating the wood mouse, it's not going to eat all of it. So then that's when our decomposers come in, which is our earthworm and our fungus, which then break down that material and recycle it back into the soil. And then our plants use that nutrients. So it's all a circle of life. All right, so that is the end of our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of things on the graphic organizer. What is a food chain, 3 parts components, and give their definition. So make sure that when you put, when we go back to our presentation, our 3 components are going to be here. You're going to write producers, and you're going to make sure that you take the definition as well. Herbivore and an example, so that's super easy. It's going to be a rabbit or something of the sort. And then in this, I want you to go ahead and look at the diagram on slide 6, which is going to be here. And you are just going to put producers, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Oops. And then you guys are going to give an example of each level on a food web. That's going to be easy. And then this is where you're going to explain how a secondary consumer can also be a tertiary consumer, and then explain the level on the food chain that has the most and least energy. So then once you guys have that done, and you're done watching the video, and you're done looking at the presentation, then you can turn that in. And then you guys have your food web practice, which is going to be another TPT, digital activities. You guys are going to log in. Oh, I'm just going to preview it for you guys. So we have another food web here, or not a food web, it's a pyramid, and you guys are going to explain these questions. You can use your notes, so if you don't want to turn it in beforehand, you don't have to, and you can turn them in at the same time once you are done with this. And then here is where you guys are going to label the organisms in this food web. So you're going to do it twice. For one, you are going to make sure that you label it either a producer, a primary consumer, secondary, tertiary, and a quaternary, which is the 4th. And then you're also going to label it as an herbivore, carnivore, or omnivore. So you can either do this by text, where you are going to put this by fox, and you are going to say it is a quaternary consumer. But then you are also going to do, if you want to write it out, or you can put just a 4, and then you are going to also put that it's going to be a carnivore. You can do it like this, or you can go ahead and take your pen and you can put a 4. Wow, that is rough. Let's redo that. Okay, pen, and I'm going to make it a little bit less thick. 4, and then it is also a carnivore, so it's going to be a 4C. So that is what you're going to do for all of these. So we know that leaf litter is going to be a producer, and it is also, well, it is not an herbivore, carnivore, or an omnivore, so you are just going to put a P for these. Well, it's okay if it looks rough. Alrighty, and then you're going to do the same for this one, which is a little bit more complicated. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and let me know. I will be online, and so will your cohort leaders. And I hope this makes sense to you. And just, you can always email me, and you can always ask me on the Meet if you need help.